1941-1945. 4 years of fierce battles, victories and defeats. 1,418 days and nights of uninterrupted work of women and children in the home front. Many civilians and soldiers died on the battlefield. The tearful celebration that was brought closer by the people of Kazakhstan. December 1944. Today is one of the happiest days, of course, if it may be possible during the war. But I feel so happy. In a radio report, they said that our country was completely liberated from the fascists. My mom and I looked at each other and then started whooping. I asked, "Will Dad come back now?" But Mother suddenly stopped smiling and had something in her mind. How we survived during this time is even terrible to remember. I will never forget my mother's eyes full of tears, the notification about Olja's death, the cry of our neighbor, and constant hunger. It feels like all of this has sat into me and will be inside for all my life. However, Dad will come back soon. It turned out that he is going to push the enemy back. Probably he wants to be sure that the fascists will not come back. By the end of 1944, during several successful military operations, the territory of the Soviet Union was completely liberated from the invaders. Further, the Soviet Army's offensive had only a liberating mission. Apparently, the soldiers whose relatives waited for them to come back continued to fulfill their duties selflessly. Many of our compatriots participated in the battles for the liberation of the occupied cities. Joly was one of them. His descendants have been carefully collecting information about their father as they aim to preserve the intangible heritage for their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The Jazykov family believe that the names of the heroes of the Republic should be well known.
В 1942 году, в январе, его призвали в ряды Красной Армии.
In January 1942, he was called up to the Red Army and studied in the town of Bogoruslan in Orenburg region for 6 months. Then he had already begun his military service as a member of the 25th Guards Brigade. He was the commander of intelligence. My father was seriously wounded. He had his first wound near Voronezh, but it was not serious. According to him, the bullet hit his knee. He spent 20 days in the hospital. After that, he joined his unit again. My father said that the last thing he remembered was that 40 intelligence officers had been sent to Budapest to take over a bridge. And he said that they had to hold that bridge for 24 hours. They managed to complete the mission, and the Soviet Union awarded my father the highest order of the Hero of the Soviet Union. It was not the only heroic feat of Jazykov. He captured more than 100 informants who gave important information about the enemy's plans. In addition to the Order of the Hero of the Soviet Union, he was also awarded the Order of Lenin, 2 orders of the Red Star, the Order of Glory of the 3rd class, and medals. To mark the 100th anniversary of Joly Jazykov, his descendants have furnished an office at the University of Aktobe. This nice office is named after my father, the hero of the Soviet Union, Joly Jazykov. Look what a nice-looking man he was. The portrait is based on his wartime photos. He was a teacher before the war. At the age of 20, he was teaching rural children. After the war, he received higher education. He met my mother in the institute, which at that time was called the Teaching Institute. 3 out of their 5 children also became teachers, and their 9 grandchildren graduated from the same university. Therefore, as a tribute to the alma mater, and as a tribute to the memory of our mom and dad, their grandchildren furnished and presented this nice office to the university. Today, descendants will tell about their heroes. Almost every family in Kazakhstan has someone to remember. War is a difficult hardship for everyone, not only physical, but also a moral one. Our compatriots were able to overcome the tragedy and became the victors. March 1945. After all these years, it was the first time I smiled while writing. I think the war that happened is different from a game and might end soon. There are changes in our city. People began to smile just like me. Previously, I looked at the radio as if it was a terrible monster. But now I'm the first one to run and listen to the radio reports. There were people who came to work and live in our city from regions occupied by the fascists. Now they are gradually returning home. Misha's family decided to stay here. Their dad said that Kazakhstan has become their homeland, and his skills would be useful at the factory. I have also changed a lot. For some reason, I feel like an adult and even old and tired. I told my mother about that. She answered, "Life will change back to normal, and your childhood will still be happy, believe me." And I believe, because only faith helps me wait for my dad. In the early spring of 1945, the Soviet army continued the rapid liberation of the captured cities of Europe. By mid-April, Soviet troops came close to Berlin. Among others, there were fighters and commanders from Kazakhstan, including Atikbay Akshayev.
Он первым пересек Бранденбургские ворота на своем танке.
He was the first who crossed the Brandenburg Gate on his tank. And he said that the hardest battles were in Berlin, because you know the streets are narrow in Berlin. It was also hard to turn around there, and a tank could be set on fire from every building. So that's how they fought there. Atikbay Akshayev was a tractor driver in peacetime. After a short training, he went to the front as a member of tank troops in 1942. He began his battle path from the Kursk Bulge and reached Berlin. 28 people were called to the front from his village, but only 4 returned, including our hero.
Я его каким помню? Он все умел делать. От строительства кладчиком, перекрывал крыши.
What do I remember about him? He was able to do everything. He could build a house and install a roof himself. He planted a garden and a vineyard. In various years, he had an apiary, was a hunter, a fisherman.
Мы храним память отца.
We keep everything about him in our memory, and we want his 22 grandchildren and 20 great-grandchildren to remember about our father and grandfather.
Все тоже помнили о нашем отце, о деде.
We want to preserve the memory about him, how they worked, how they fought, how they developed post-war Kazakhstan, how they worked for the sake of Kazakhstan, who were the heroes of Kazakhstan from Shymkent city.
Именно из Чимкента какие герои были. Хотим, чтобы о нем память сохранилась.
On the night of May the 9th, 1945, the Wehrmacht Supreme Commander Wilhelm Keitel signed the German instrument of surrender. That is how the war ended for those who during 4 years struggled to bring that day closer at the front and in the home front.
Внимание! Говорит Москва. 8 мая 1900...
Attention, this is Moscow speaking. On May the 8th, 1945, representatives of the German High Command signed the German Instrument of Surrender in Berlin. The World War II that the Soviet people waged against the fascist invaders is victoriously completed. Germany is completely defeated.
Немецко-фашистских захватчиков победоносно завершена. Германия полностью разгромлена.
9 мая 45-го года я как раз был на связи, как бы дежурил, что ли, радиостанции. И вдруг слышно.
May the 9th, 1945, I was just on duty in communication room. I heard on the air, the war is over, surrender.
Рация. И вот я до сих пор не пойму, как получилось. Связь у нас.
And I still don't understand how it happened. I was responsible for communication, but people knew about everything without my message. Everybody went outside, often congratulations to each other. There was such a hullabaloo. Everyone was happy, of course.
Такая канонада. Я разговорюсь, понятно.
День Победы встретил в Австрии.
I was in Austria, near Vienna, on the Victory Day. Vienna is their capital. Everyone was happy that they remained alive.
Радовались.
We made 5 shots in the air.
Ой, 5 патронов пустили в воздух. По его команде этого нашего старшего офицера он сказал,
Our senior officer said that the war would end the next day. He said the victory will be announced.
мы в полночь
We will go to the square at midnight and we'll see the sunrise and the peaceful sky. Let's go.
мирного солнца все. Пошли, начали восхищаться. Вот-вот ждали, как солнце покажется.
We were waiting for the sunrise and the sun really seemed so beautiful.
Интересно.
That's how I personally welcomed the Victory Day at a military hospital in Schönhausen, Germany.
В военном госпитале в Германии Шенхаузен.
On May the 9th, they announced that we defeated Germany. On May the 9th, we shouted hooray, drank 100 grams of Japanese short chew and then started preparing for the departure to the Japanese front.
Солдаты не были сразу демобилизованы и
The soldiers were not immediately demobilized and did not immediately go home. We know that the soldiers came back in the summer and fall of 1946 and in 1947. They defended their land. They did a great job.
большую работу все военные проводили.
Many of our compatriots continued to fight in combat battles until the end of the Japanese War. Some soldiers returned to their homeland in May 1945. Here, they met those who day and night brought the victory closer in the home front. That very generation that overcame the terrible war had to work in the post-war years in order to restore the economy of the Republic.
В стране все равно существовала карточная система.
There was still a card system in the country. There was a severe shortage of everything. There was no bread. There was nothing. Everything had to be revived. That's why Stalin, in his speech in 1945, said that everything had to be restored as soon as possible. That 5-year period after the war was spent on restoration. Kazakhstan made a great contribution to the restoration of the whole country. Despite the fact that the republic had to restore its own economy, Kazakhstan continued to support the cities of the Soviet Union, which were badly damaged during the fascist occupation. Thus, Kazakhstan sent trains loaded with timber, coal, metal, and other industrial and agricultural products.
Например, в первую очередь, когда в 1944-м в январе освободили Ленинград и Ленинградскую область, то Казахстан...
When Leningrad and Leningrad region were liberated in January 1944, Kazakhstan became responsible for that vast region. Above all, they sent cattle and other products there to make people live and recover.
Чтобы люди элементарно там жили, восстанавливали.
During the war, a large number of industrial enterprises were evacuated to the Republic. It allowed to increase the capacity of the country's industrial potential.
В Казахстан было эвакуировано 200...
220 large plants and factories were evacuated to Kazakhstan. I'm not talking about small ones. They were located in different regions of the country. All factories and plants remained here. Only staff left, those of them who wished to leave.
Те, кто пожелал.
After the population was re-evacuated to the western regions of the USSR, the country faced a major shortage of labor resources. It was necessary to work out an education process for the local people. Part-time and evening schools for working youth in rural and urban areas were formed. In 1947, the Soviet government issued the decree on the measures of further development of higher and secondary education in the Kazakh SSR. Thanks to a number of measures that were taken, education has significantly improved in the Republic. Shymkent, as well as other post-war cities, recovered with difficulty after the war. The post-war years, the period between 1945 and 1950. Of course, it was a difficult time and food products could only be received using cards. Understandably, after the war, all reconstruction works took place in the western regions of the country. Shymkent remained an industrial city. There was an increase in the number of factories and plants. Thus, there were a chemicals and pharmaceuticals plant, a forge and press equipment plant, and a lead plant that continued to operate. However, since that time, all plants manufactured goods for the civilians and not for the defense. In the post-war 5-year plan, the main emphasis was placed on the development of heavy industry, the restoration of agriculture, the laying of new railway lines, and the improvement of cultural development in the Republic. During all these years, the citizens of Kazakhstan worked for the good of their homeland.
Открывались вузы, открывались...
The universities were opened, concert halls started operating. People began to live in a new way.
по-новому.
But at the same time, in the post-war years, many Kazakh families who didn't receive official documents about what happened to their loved ones who did not return home continued to wait, believed, and looked for them. My father was looking for the grave of our grandfather. His brothers did the same. During the war, many people received not only death notifications, but also information that the soldier was missing. But it turns out that during the war, all information was kept and recorded, even the date and time of death and the location where they were buried. I visited Kalinin region in Russia just 2 or 3 years ago. where we found the burial of our grandfather. I would like to tell the people of Kazakhstan who are looking for their ancestors that it is, first of all, a noble cause. It is a contribution to the history. It is a contribution to the history of your family. May the 9th, 1945. I want this day to be the last in my diary notes. The day I've been waiting for since Dad went to the front. What happened when we found out about the victory? Everyone slipped out to the street and screamed. I stayed at home. I couldn't even move. Suddenly, everything seemed to be as in a fog. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't.
9 мая.
On May the 9th, in the morning, we were at home. Our shutters were still closed. Someone knocked.
Не окна вот эти.
What happened? We went out. Everyone was outside.
Ой, как стучит.
The war ended. The war ended.
Вышли наружу.
How many tears there were. How much joy there was.
Сколько
Everyone hugged each other. Oh, the war ended. The war ended.
кончилось.
В моей семье 8
There were 8 children in our family. I am the youngest. That war was very difficult for us, and probably we will never forget about it while we're alive.
когда, наверное, пока мы
When we heard that the war was over, we rejoiced and hugged.
что
We were happy that we were alive.
обрадовались,
The war was over.
радовались, ну понятно, что живы остались, война кончилась. В то время радио не было. Вот. День Победы из райцентра верхом на лошади.
There was no radio at that time. On the Victory Day, the local official rode through all villages on a horse and declared,
Объявлял.
"The Victory Day. The war is over.
Война
Long live the victory."
Да здравствует.
People rejoiced and hugged each other. They were waiting for those who were alive at the front to be back with victory.
Победой, кто остался живым на фронте.
May the 9th, 1945. After a while, I felt relieved. I felt like the heavy bag that I had been carrying for all these years suddenly disappeared. The victory. And it was my dad who brought it. From that day, I was looking at the window all the time, ran out into the street, shuddered at the slightest rustle. I waited for my dad. I waited for him. And my dad came back home.
45-й год мы как раз
We were playing near the river and saw a man on the horse. We thought, what is it? What happened? Everybody ran to the center, where we already heard, hooray! It's the victory! The victory! The whole village, everyone gathered near their office. Everybody was so happy. Children threw their hats.
очень было
There were really joyful moments.
Ой, кто плачет, кто рыдает, кто смеется.
Some people were crying, others were laughing. Everybody hugged each other. Some of them were just moaning with tears.
Плачет, потому что
Some residents were crying because their relatives died before that.
этого.
Левитан, вот этот, как его голос.
Levitan's voice is still in my ears. The victory. Everyone went outside, throwing their hats. People shouted, "Victory!" Everybody hugged each other and cried.
Обнимает, плачет.
In memory of those who did not come back. As a tribute to those whose courage on the battlefields and dedicated work in the home front brought the day of May the 9th, 1945 closer. To the people of Kazakhstan who overcame that period with honor. A project, our common victory, to make everyone know, remember, and honor.